Welcome to Outdoor Spotlight, an interview and insight program brought to you by Northwest Sportsman Magazine and www.nwsportsmanmag.com. Now let's check in for all things for the Northwest Sportsman.
Hi, I'm Jeff Miller with Last Rooster Standing with my buddy Dutch. Come hunt with us and experience the difference in our quality cover, habitat, terrain, birds, dogs, staff, and overall experience. You will love the Republic area in north central Washington and will experience the rugged but gentle hills of the scablands of the Western Palouse.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Jim Klark. Today we are really grateful to have Tom Ryle with us. He is a sales and marketing manager with the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife. He grew up on the shores of southern Puget Sound and has been fishing, crabbing, and hunting his entire life. His passion for bow hunting grew during his college years, and he's fueled many adventures across US, Canada, and South Africa. Tom is a dedicated educator, mentor, and volunteer, and he enjoys getting hunters started on the right path. With a long career background in product design and development across many industries, he's enjoyed meeting and working with people from around the world, sharing homemade venison jerky, smoked salmon, and stories from a field. It's allowed him to really enjoy the outdoor lifestyle and also address many diverse audiences. Tom joined the department in 2018 to lead marketing for the agency, primarily centered on increasing awareness, appreciation, and participation in fishing, hunting, and outdoor recreation through product and service innovation, service design and customer experience, licensed dealer support, public outreach, events, and strategic growth initiatives that generate revenue for the agency. We're so glad to have you here today. Tell me a little bit more about your background and what led you to your current role in WDFW.
Sure. So lifelong hunter and angler, grew up here in Washington State, and long story short, I had sort of a career path decision to make when I was in college, and I chose my passion for building things and inventing, and I pursued a career in product design and development. I had a full career doing that for many years. And all the while, though, I've stayed very in touch with the conservation side of my life in the hunting and fishing industry. I've done a lot of freelance writing, a lot of mentoring and coaching. I've done volunteer work, taught bow hunter ed, done a lot of things in the hunting and the conservation side. And during a consulting gig, I was working on the department's website. I was a consultant, and through the 2 years of kind of re-architecting our entire website and redesigning that, I saw an opportunity to join the department and work on this stuff full time. And here I am. I'm really enjoying it. It's been almost 3 years.
Tom, so how large is your team that you work with, and on your day-to-day work, can you give us some examples of what you do?
Sure. So my team is comprised of 8 people, including myself. Our statewide licensed dealer network is about 600 licensed dealers located all over the state, including some dealers over the borders into Canada, Idaho, and Oregon. And so we have 4 account reps that service and help maintain all of those dealer network relationships, their equipment, promotions. That whole relationship is owned by those 4 people, divvied up in 4 different territories. And then on the inside, we have graphic design, a content specialist who's a seasoned writer and editor and helps us put really good content out, and then a marketing lead and myself. And I bring kind of that freelance writing component, a lot of mentoring and coaching. So I kind of a jack of all trades in this space, along with social media marketing. What we do is varied. We have a lot of campaigns going on, but for the most part, our goal is to inform the public, make people aware of opportunities that exist within the state, the different seasons, the different opportunities, and we create promotions. We help create license packages with the licensing division, which is where we reside. We've tried to focus on really giving people information to help them take the next step to get outside and enjoy hunting and fishing and recreation in the state.
really important, Tom, I think, to talk about the mywdfw.com, which is a new site. And what is the purpose of that new website, and how is it different from another full agency site?
Sure. So large government sites can be daunting, quite frankly. There's a lot of information. It covers the entire gamut of everything we do. And being a marketing team and located in licensing, our primary objective is to help people with information that helps them decide and choose what license they might need or want to buy to go participate. So this site really was drafting off the state of Oregon. There's a national movement called R3, which is to recruit, retain, and reactivate hunters and anglers in this country. And our R3 teams across state borders work together, share ideas. We do this nationally. And Oregon started this site a few years ago to really kind of cut through the government side and get to more of a consumer-facing personal side of providing information to the public. So looking at the success Oregon has had, we decided to follow suit. And that's what we're doing with the site. We just launched it, and we're starting to put a lot of content out to help people in season, like right now, things you can go do, information you can take and put to use today in the field.
Speaking of hunting, the fall hunting is really getting into full swing right now. Let's talk just briefly about some of your tips and tactics going into this season for 2021.
Sure. So I think there's a lot of ways you can approach it, but you know, for the average person that's wanting to get back out and get out there right now, on the deer side of things, we're in deer season. The modern rifle season's underway for blacktail, mule deer, and whitetails statewide. On the west side, we have blacktails. The pre-rut phase is starting to heat up, so you're going to start seeing a lot more deer activity during daylight hours going up to Halloween, the end of that first part of that rifle season. So I would encourage people to hunt all day, stay in the game, because you never know when a buck's going to step out or present a shot opportunity as they seek does, and that's going to increase steadily here into Halloween. On the east side of the state with mule deer and whitetails, same thing is true. However, you've got some habitat differences and deer behavior differences between these species of deer. So with mule deer, I'm going to be looking for, in that sage country, I'm going to be looking for coulees and breaks and different terrain features that funnel deer. Again, focusing on does, and where you'll find does, you'll start finding bucks. And on the whitetail woods, you can hunt those mountain ridge bucks, or you can hunt more of the agricultural type habitat. Both, same thing, you're going to focus on does, but how you hunt and how you approach those habitats are a little different. I might use a tree stand for whitetails hunting ag fields, whereas if I'm hunting in mountain areas, I'm going to really focus on terrain features and funnels and probably stay on foot.
And whitetails that are further east on the eastern side of the state.
So obviously the habitats differ between blacktails, mule deer, and I know there's some crossover with mule deer and whitetail, but I tend to categorize it like this. For mule deer, you have your sort of valley floor or sage country, breaks and coulees type habitat, and then you get into your more mountainous habitat. And with mule deer, you're going to have resident bucks hanging out with resident does. But later in November, when those snows hit, you're going to get a lot of those bucks will move down out of the higher elevation in seek of those does to breed. So for mule deer, I would still be concentrating on higher elevation, unless you're, again, hunting some of the sage country and some of the breaks and coulees, where you still will have resident bucks in those areas. For whitetails, I think there's sort of two categories of habitat. We have the agricultural type habitat, where there's a patchwork of fields and ditches and windrows of trees and different things. And then you've got your more mountain habitat for whitetails. Both kind of require a different approach. Whitetails tend to love funnels, and they move through that path of least resistance. So good tactics there are to set up on funnel areas that concentrate deer movement, focus on those doe feeding areas, because that'll become of interest to those bucks. And You know, a lot of guys are using tree stands. A lot of folks are using ground blinds to hunt with families and kids. Highly encourage that. Both are effective for both mule deer and whitetails as well as blacktails out here on the west side.
You mentioned tree stands, Tom, and can you share more about how you would go about using those?
Yeah, so elevated tree stands are becoming more popular in the West. Probably started to gain most of the popularity in the eastern part of the state, you know, hunting whitetails. But tree stands are a great way to get off the ground, get your scent up off the ground, and you know, they're portable, so you can find a good location. I like to find areas, like I mentioned, funnels. I look for areas that concentrate deer movement or edge habitat, or simply pathways between bedding areas and feed areas, and finding good pinch points in between are great locations to pop up a portable tree stand. And of course, with tree stands, you want to make sure you're using, you know, Tree Stand Manufacturers Association has some standards. I would make sure you're buying high quality products, using, you know, lifeline type products that help you stay connected in case of falls from the ground all the way to the top. You don't want to be up there without safety equipment.
I think everyone would agree, Tom, safety first.
Yeah.
In the field. So have you had success using deer scents and any calling items or rattling horns or anything like that?
Yeah, I actually do a lot of game calling, both for elk and deer. I've done some for bears as well. And I find that scent is another level of calling. There's sound, naturally, the things you mentioned, rattling of antlers, signifying two bucks that are sparring over a doe that might be an estrus. There's doe bleats, fawn bleats, buck grunts. There's a whole myriad of calls and audible sounds that you can make. A lot to go into there. But in terms of scent, deer and deer, especially among ungulates, are really scent driven. They have a number of scent glands, and they use these different glands to communicate different things. So with scent, it's kind of tricky. A lot of people will go buy a bottle of doe urine and they'll pour it all over the place. And it's really kind of an unnatural presentation of that scent. So I tend to use a little bit of scent and try to use that to either stop deer or create a pause for a deer within an area that I'm hunting. Oftentimes I'll do a scent drag where I'll put scent on a piece of parachute cord, and I'll walk in a sort of a figure eight around my tree stand, maybe going out 60, 70 yards on either direction, and the center of that figure eight being my tree, so that any deer that crosses any of those trails that I had walked may lock onto that scent drag and follow it back into my stand location, which I've had happen numerous times. But primarily I have the most luck with scent, using it in small amounts in an area that I want to stop a deer out of curiosity to scent check something such that I might get a shot opportunity.
So let's talk about the rut a little bit more. Many hunters want to know when the rut occurs. You mentioned that earlier, and how to hunt though in the different phases of the rut. What advice could you share about that?
Sure. So there's a lot of questions about the rut. It's a topic every year that gets so much attention from riders all over the country. And I think, you know, being a student of that myself, I've come to, I guess, some best practices, if you will. And I tend to think that, like, between about the 23rd of October to Halloween, I consider that the active pre-rut phase. What we're seeing right now is a little early. You'll see bucks chasing does, and people will say, oh, the rut is cranked up in my area. Well, what you're seeing is the very early stages of the pre-rut. Bucks are getting feisty, the testosterone's starting to flow, and they're starting to chase does around. But that really doesn't become, in my mind, an effective hunting opportunity until you get really late in October. So I like to look at it from like the 26th to the 31st. I'm going to spend as much time in the woods during daylight hours as possible, because you're going to see buck movement all day. and deer will be moving, crossing trails, scent checking doe bedding areas, and they're seeking deer. They're seeking does to breed. Now, those does are not ready to breed yet. They will start to come in shortly into early November, but this late October period, there's just a lot of movement, a lot of frenzy. There's a lot of rubs being made by bucks. So it's a very active time for deer, 24 hours a day. And that means you've got a good daylight span of time to be in a stand or be out watching a clear cut or what have you.
Great.
So to summarize it, I would say this pre-rut phase we're in right now, it's going to peak around really the last couple of days of the season, the early rifle season, or the early portion of the modern rifle season. So between now and the 31st, I would consider that sort of the pre-rut seeking phase. And then you go into the chasing phase, which is around the 30th to about, I'd say the first 7-8 days in November. And now you're actually working on active breeding. And so this is where it gets to where rattling becomes very effective, more aggressive calling. Again, scents are a very tricky subject. So if you're not confident with scents, I wouldn't introduce scents. I would spend more time actually in the field observing, because you're going to see a lot of movement. And then the tending phase kind of goes from that 7th or 8th of November right to about mid-month. And I would consider that peak breeding. And this is where does get locked down with bucks, and it becomes very difficult to find those deer because they sequester those does off to keep them from being harassed by other bucks. And it can get very quiet this time of the month in the woods.
All right, so we've talked a lot about deer hunting. What about elk? Now, the bugling action on that rut is over, correct? And how can people locate elk during this late fall season?
So yeah, elk statewide, it's a little different because you have migratory elk on the east side, and on the west side here with Roosevelt elk, they don't really migrate. But what happens after the rut, which kind of wraps up around the first week in October, there's a lot of bugling action continues into October. And for those folks, muzzleloaders and such, they see some good bugling action then. After that, though, your winter herds start to form. The younger bulls, the spikes, and even some of the small raghorn 2.5-year-old bulls will reassemble with cows or stay assembled with the cows. Bulls will start to go off on their own. And what you have then is this sort of separation of the mature, bigger bulls and the herd. So it depends on what you're trying to do. If you're a bow hunter looking to fill a tag in late season, I would focus on, those really nice, gentle slopes, bedding areas on benches, above feed areas or adjacent to clear cuts that are in that prime feed age of, I'd say, between 4 and 7 years of age. A clear cut has a lot of good browse and feed. A lot of grasses are growing in late in the fall. That's a good option. I think on the east side, I would be looking for solitary bulls or cows if you have a permit or something like that. Again, south-facing slopes are getting more sun, a little bit more heat. When you get early snows, they're going to migrate to the south-facing slopes and tend to bed on benches. So those are good bets to start narrowing in on places to look.
So Tom, I would guess that you're kind of a gear junkie because you're a product manager. What types of products, what type of new things are out there going into this year that you would recommend or you're excited about?
Well, I think just like the fishing industry, the hunting industry is full of gadgets and gizmos and things. And I guess the first thing I would recommend people do is have a plan, especially elk hunting. Late season, you get a little cooler weather. So the meat concern about spoilage isn't as great as it is in the early bow season. That being said, having a good plan, making sure you've got good boots, you've got the right gear clothing wise, you've got coolers, what you're going to do to get ice, or if you're going to go and drop meat off at a meat cutter, or if you plan to take that meat home. I don't know about anybody else, but for me, I'm usually packing meat out at 2 a.m, and most stores aren't open to go get ice. So I bring ice with me. I fill up 2 large coolers full of ice and I leave them completely shut until, I either fill my tag or I'm on my way home. But those are some things. I think ground blinds have advanced quite a bit, and there's so many choices for families or folks wanting to get their kids out. Fall can be cold and miserable, and with kids, you want to keep them warm. So a ground blind is a great option to keep the weather off. You can take, some snacks and food. You can take a buddy heater in certain cases if you're not going too far, and you can share those fall hunting memories with your family or kids or those who really don't do well in the cold, wet weather. Those are some things that come to mind. I mean, to me, I buy the best optics I could afford. I buy the best boots I can afford because those are things that are going to keep me in the hunt in the fall. As you know, it's very cold. You get snow, you get wind and rain, and you've got to be prepared with the right gear.
Nothing like cold feet, cold hands.
Yeah.
But then a big buck walks in and all of a sudden you're fine.
Yeah, it's funny how that happens. You forget how cold you are, how wet you are when you see an animal that changes the game for sure.
Anything else, Tom, you'd like to share with our audience?
Well, we touched on a lot of things quickly today. I would encourage folks to really, if you're new, I mentor a number of new hunters every year, and I just love it when people contact me looking for information because I'm seeing a lot of people in their 20s and 30s, even 40s, getting into hunting for the first time. And one thing that I'm wanting to do with the department is start, really putting effort into our outreach around new hunting, new hunters, recruiting, retention of those folks. What information do people want from the department that we can help bring to bear and share? With the mywdfw.com site, I encourage people to check it out. If they have ideas on information that they want, I got a tip from a guy the other day looking for information on Roosevelt elk. So I'm going to write up a piece on Roosevelt elk hunting in the fall. So those are the kinds of things I'm looking for. We're here to help serve the public. We want to encourage people to hunt and fish and get out and enjoy themselves. And we want to make sure that we're providing that information to help people do that. So if people want to get a hold of me, they can reach me through my email, tom.ryle@dfw.wa.gov, and love to help people out.
We've been talking to Tom Ryle. He's with the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife. Tom, thank you very, very much.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me on, Jim. Appreciate it.